Okay, think about this. Every single day, we're bombarded with these bold claims, right? This pill cures that disease. This new diet is going to make you live longer. But how do we actually know what works? How do we prove that doing one specific thing actually causes a specific result, and it's not just some random coincidence? Well, that's exactly what we're jumping straight into today, the machinery of truth.
Let's say you want to figure out if vitamin E prevents disease. You find a group of people taking it regularly, and wow, they are incredibly healthy. Case closed, right? Nope. Actually wrong. Does the vitamin make them healthy? Or do healthy people, the ones who already exercise and eat well, just happen to take vitamins? It's the ultimate chicken or egg scenario, and it perfectly captures the core dilemma of cause and effect that researchers literally face every single day.
So by the end of this explainer, you're going to understand the strict rules of experimental design. You'll get the exact formula for spotting the hidden variables that absolutely ruin bad research, and we'll look at the devastating real-world cost of scientific fraud. I promise you, you're never going to read a news headline about a new scientific study the same way again.
Section 1. Designing a fair test. How to prove cause and effect. All right, let's dive right into the terminology, because this is the bedrock of literally every study. The whole point of an experiment is to investigate the relationship between two specific things, which we call variables. First up, the explanatory variable. This is the trigger. It's the thing that researcher manipulates or introduces to cause a change. Then we have the response variable, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's the result. It's the affected variable that we measure at the very end. Let's make this super concrete with a famous example. Researchers wanted to know if taking aspirin regularly actually reduces the risk of heart attacks. In this setup, the explanatory variable, so the trigger we're introducing, is the oral medication, the aspirin. The response variable, the outcome we're measuring, is whether or not the person actually has a heart attack over the course of the study. See? One causes, the other responds.
Now wait, this is absolutely crucial, so let's pause here for a second. Without clearly defining who or what we are testing on, our data is completely useless. Enter the experimental unit. This is the single object or individual being measured. In our aspirin study, the experimental unit is the individual person taking the pill. If we were testing, say, a new fertilizer, the unit would be a single plant. You have to define exactly what you're measuring before you do anything else.
Section 2. Anatomy of an experiment. Treatments and groups. So, to truly measure change, we have to compare those who get the treatment against those who don't. The different values of the explanatory variable are called treatments. So, we divide our experimental units into groups. The treatment group receives the active explanatory variable. They get the actual aspirin. The control group, on the other hand, receives no active treatment. Why? Because think about it. If everyone gets the aspirin and heart attacks go down, how do we know it wasn't just a naturally healthy year for everybody? We need a baseline to compare against.
Section 3. Beware of lurking variables. The hidden factors.
Okay, so a massive part of this is understanding lurking variables. These are the hidden additional variables that can cloud a study and secretly influence the outcome. Let's connect this right back to our vitamin E problem from the very beginning. If we just observe people taking vitamin E, the lurking variables are their exercise habits, their healthy diets, maybe the fact that they don't smoke. These hidden factors are doing the heavy lifting, making the results totally messy and basically impossible to trust. And honestly, it's exactly like baking a cake with 5 brand new ingredients at the exact same time. If the cake tastes absolutely terrible, which ingredient ruined it? Well, you have no idea. You didn't isolate the variables. To actually prove cause and effect, researchers have to design their experiment so there's only one single difference between the groups, and that's the planned treatment. Everything else, it has to be randomized and perfectly equal.
Section 4. The power of suggestion and why our brains trick us.
Now at this point, you might be asking, why do we even bother giving the control group a fake pill? Like, why not just give them nothing at all? It kind of seems like a waste of time and resources, doesn't it?
Well, the reason is the power of suggestion. Studies consistently show that simply expecting a cure can actually trigger a real physical response in the body, sometimes almost as fast as a real drug. If the treatment group gets a pill and the control group gets absolutely nothing, the treatment group might feel better simply because they're taking a pill. To counter this, researchers use a placebo treatment. It's a fake pill like a sugar pill that has no medical effect whatsoever. This balances out that psychological effect of being treated across both groups.
But here's the catch. A placebo only works if you don't know it's a placebo. And that brings us to blinding. Step 1 is simple blinding. That's where the participant has no idea if they're taking the real aspirin or the fake sugar pill. Step 2 is the absolute gold standard, the double-blind experiment. In a double-blind setup, neither the participant nor the researcher handing them the pill knows who is getting what. Why blind the researcher? Because honestly, a researcher who knows they're handing over a life-saving drug might unconsciously smile or act a little differently, which tips off the patient and completely ruins the data.
Section 5. Ethics and Scientific Fraud. The Real-World Consequences.
Take a look at this truly chilling quote. This is from Diederik Stapel, a formerly highly respected social psychologist in the Netherlands. He was caught committing scientific fraud on just a massive scale. And when he was asked why, he didn't just say he was overly ambitious. He said he was frustrated by the messiness of real experimental data. Because, real humans are unpredictable. Real data rarely looks perfect. So he just made it up. He literally chose aesthetics over the truth.
And look at the colossal scale of this betrayal. He didn't just tweak a number here or there. He fabricated entire data sets out of thin air. He altered existing data to fit his personal theories, and he secretly changed measuring instruments. His falsified data tainted over 55 published papers in top journals and corrupted 10 PhD dissertations that he supervised. It's just a stark reminder that the misuse of statistics isn't some abstract concept. It actively damages human knowledge.
Because of cases exactly like Staples, and honestly even darker ethical violations in medical history, we have regulatory heroes. Enter the Institutional Review Boards, or IRBs. These are mandatory oversight committees. Basically, anytime a university or an institution wants to experiment on human subjects, they can't just start handing out pills or running psychological tests. No way. They must get their detailed study design approved in advance by an IRB.
And these boards enforce incredibly strict federal laws. First, risks to participants must be absolutely minimized and balanced against the potential benefits. Second, participants must give informed written consent. They need to know exactly what they are signing up for. And third, data must be fiercely guarded to protect privacy. Because you aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet, right? You're human beings whose rights have to be protected at all costs.
Okay, before we finish up, let's quickly summarize the 4 key pillars of experimental design we've built today. 1. You must isolate your explanatory variable so you can actually see what causes the change. 2. You have to randomly assign groups to control for those sneaky lurking variables. 3. You counter the power of suggestion by using placebos and double blinding. And 4. You absolutely must adhere strictly to ethical guidelines and IRB oversight, ensuring your pursuit of truth doesn't harm the very people you're studying.
I want to leave you with one final, really practical thought. We just said IRBs protect privacy, but think about this for a second. If a researcher strips your name from a medical data record, is your privacy truly protected? Or in our modern digital age, can your identity still be easily reverse engineered just from your zip code, your age, and your specific medical history?